Blitz off the edge. Cousins throws, and it's taken away by Addison for the touchdown. He and Charvarius Ward fighting for the ball, and this time Addison takes it for the score. Kittle's had one big game this season. That was at home against Dallas. Here's McCaffrey. He's gone. Touchdown 49ers. Purdy steps through, floats it, he's picked, and that's it. Bynum gets another.
This season is hammered. This season needs to be put in a cab and sent home before it says something it can't take back. This season needs to take Advil and drink 4 glasses of water before they go to sleep. Preventative, because when we wake up tomorrow, we're going to have a big headache trying to make sense of the NFL. That was pretty good. Kirk Cousins led the way for the Minnesota Vikings in just a tremendous primetime performance. I don't think that's a thing anymore. Going 35 of 45 for 378, 2 touchdowns, and a 22-17 win over the suddenly vulnerable San Francisco 49ers. His counterpart, Brock Purdy, you heard there threw 2 late interceptions, including a moonball over the middle to clinch the second straight defeat for the Niners after their 5-0 head start. I am Dan Hanzus, coming to you virtually. A room filled with heroes, Gregg Rosenthal and Marc Sessler. Greg, I want to start with Cousins here because, no Justin Jefferson, and the general idea was no hope for the Vikings. And it kind of goes back to a thing, and it's been an eternal conversation around this player. Like, is he good? Is he very good? Is he mediocre? Man, Kirk Cousins is a really good quarterback, and he's proving it again for a Vikings team that is suddenly right back in the middle of the NFC playoff race.
I love that he had this performance in primetime because it shouldn't feel like it means more because it's at night and it's in an island game, but it does, especially because of the team he was going against. Look, I give the Vikings offensive line a silver medal in this game. I did not think that they could dominate in the way that they did early in this game. I thought Kirk Cousins held the ball like a half second longer on a lot of these plays than he normally does, and it's because the protection held up, but he held it and he waited till the last second till his receivers were getting open down the field when he needed to. At one point in this game, he was 8 for 8 for 188 on passes over 10 yards, and I think that number got even better in the fourth quarter. It wasn't updated. You're absolutely right, Dan. Like, he was the absolute difference in this game, and if you're just waking up in London or you're watching baseball or something and you didn't see it, you might be like, wow, the Vikings got out of there with a win. They could have won this game by 15 points. I'm really glad the result was how it finished, Mark, because he was the better quarterback and they were the much better team on the day. It actually felt a little closer than it needed to be, but they ended up getting it done.
Yep, and I have a bit of a Niners fetish, and I agree with you. I thought that it was Minnesota's night. We got the best version of Kirk Cousins in prime time. Both teams missing their star wide receiver. You don't have Deebo Samuel. You don't have Justin Jefferson. And I thought the Niners are going to find a way to get their way out of this and find a way with all their other stars to make production. And it was the opposite. It was Jordan Addison tonight. I mean, I thought he played spectacularly. And they got production from the run game, which has been up and down all season. I think they came into the game with 11 rushes of 10-plus yards. They had 3 of them early tonight. Kirk Cousins played really, I think, the best game of the entire season for himself. And their offensive line, there's no sacks for the Niners. I thought Kirk Cousins found a way to puncture the middle of that San Francisco defense. And this was the Vikings team we've kind of been waiting for. And yes, could they potentially melt down at the end? They found a way to not do that. And the Niners, suddenly, you've lost 2 games. You're in a strange spot. I'm not really worried about them, but they're a little banged up. But I don't leave concerned about the Niners. But this is not where we thought we'd be with them a fortnight ago.
Yeah. And by the way, you mentioned Cousins was not sacked. He had 45 pass attempts in this game and not sacked. And I think I heard a stat that's the most attempts for a player this season without being sacked. So a huge shout out to the offensive line. And yeah, Jordan Addison, we've been seeing Addison flashing this season as a real number 2 and the replacement for Adam Thielen there, and he kind of put a stamp on that. TJ Hawkinson, before he went out for injury, was getting open and getting the ball. He had 11 catches in the game. And, listen, the NFC is weird, man. Like, Mark, I know you nominated the Vikings to be forked last week, and it was shot down because Minnesota has the chance in this division to get back into this thing. And they already are back into this thing after an 0-3 start. It took one big victory to kind of change their whole season. And here it is against the 49ers. On the San Francisco side of things, you didn't have Debo, but let's face it, you really haven't had Debo for most of this year. It's been another one of those years where he's just banged up and he could be out through the bye with that hairline fracture in his shoulder. But you did have Brandon Ayuk, who was 5 for 57 in this game, but not necessarily a difference maker. George Kittle had some catches, obviously, but obviously they didn't hook up for anything, in the red zone. Christian McCaffrey was held in check here. He averaged 3 yards a carry on 15 rushes. He obviously busted one on a short pass for a touchdown and scored another on the ground to keep his incredible streak going. So there are elements of that offense that looked okay, but to me, it's been Purdy the last 2 weeks. I worry if, when we were speaking of London, when we were in London, I did a heavy metal rendition of Brocktober and its return with Brock Purdy replacing Brock Osweiler. And all of a sudden, Purdy is looking extremely mortal, Greg. And I know that you had said last week you didn't think Purdy necessarily played terribly against the Browns. There was just stretches where he didn't play so well. In this game, especially with those late picks, God, you start to get a little bit nervous about him coming down to earth now and looking more like the guy what we expected him to be when he first entered the lineup.
Well, I think this was very similar to last week in the way I looked at it, too. You heard Troy Aikman say, I think it was starting the fourth quarter, you'd be hard-pressed to find a game where you thought the two quarterbacks played any better. And I thought Purdy was almost throwing a perfect game through 3 quarters. And then you started seeing the limitation. Not like everything he did was perfect, but they only had 3 drives in the first half. One of them ends on the McCaffrey fumble. Another mistake with penalties, and they missed the field goal on another. They score the touchdown on the third one. They get a very quick touchdown drive to end the third quarter. And I thought at that point, Purdy is playing really well. And then suddenly in the fourth quarter, they're trailing. He's throwing these timing throws with a lot of confidence, and he just misses one to Jennings. There's another play where he's scrambling left on a third down, and you think all the superhumans that play quarterback in the NFL can throw the ball across their body and complete it. He was trying to get it to Ayuk on that play, and Purdy just didn't have the arm strength to do it. And then he's given the ball late with no timeouts, a chance to go down the field. Can he finally have that kind of big game-winning drive? He hasn't had the opportunity to do that until last week, really, in Cleveland. And he just throws up a pass that was a nice play by Cam Bynum, but they were going over the middle of the field. And you saw his limitations, I think, show up there. I'm not panicked about it, but it definitely didn't give you confidence that, if he's in a Kirk Cousins-like spot where people are being taken away and he's under pressure, is he going to come through? He obviously didn't tonight.
I am with you. I think that, it's fair to have normal expectations about what Brock Purdy would be very early in his career. But tonight for me was about a Niners defense that's been dominant for long stretches for a number of years. They looked a little uncomfortable tonight. And I'd even point to the fact that the Vikings had one drive that ended on San Francisco's 2-yard line, and that was a long drive. Then another one that ended on the 3-yard line of San Francisco, also a long drive, both field goals. I mean, this game could have been a much different situation going into the fourth quarter because we got a Vikings offense that actually was extremely productive, and their understudies, like the Jordan Addisons of the world, stepped up and did what I would have thought, the Niners will find a way to get 6 guys we've never heard of to produce.
It was one of the best offensive performances by any team all season. Tonight's Minnesota.
I'd agree.
I know that sounds weird because they ended up with 22 points, but considering the opponent, they only had 8 drives, Dan. They put up 400 and what was it? 452 in 8 drives. All 8 drives against the 49ers essentially were successful until they either, had the turnover on the first drive where it was Ward and Addison, fighting for the ball, and probably should have been Addison's catch. A similar play ended up being a touchdown. We can get to that. But other than that, they were moving the ball, and it really took Kevin O'Connell getting a little conservative on some 4th down decisions, or else they would have had more. I was stunned to see the 49ers defense, which really isn't that injured. They're pretty healthy. I know Greenlaw and Warner both got banged up late in this game, but they both came back. It was kind of mystifying to me to see an offensive line for Minnesota steamroll them. They were running well early too.
What's the defense now? And this plays into the NFL's hammer drunk right now. What is the defense that has for 7 weeks gone kind of undefeated, if you will? I mean, I think about all these great defenses: San Francisco, Cleveland, the Jets, Dallas, New Orleans, Detroit. I mean, Baltimore has been very good. I know. I'm blanking right now whether they had a real slip up yet. But you're seeing all these teams kind of go into these funks, and it tells you there's probably not a truly great difference-making defense, or maybe it's more just a long season, and this is a bad night for the Niners on that side of the ball. But it is, again, you got to give so much credit to Cousins and Kevin O'Connell to be able to do this without the best wide receiver in the league, with him on the sideline wearing sunglasses. It's a pretty remarkable achievement. And I know we've talked about Kyle Shanahan before, and he is a gifted offensive mind, but he can be sometimes conservative. I'm trying to wrap my head around that decision with a struggling field goal kicker early in the 4th quarter to go for the 55-yard field goal with a struggling rookie to make it 22-17 when it's 4th and 6 from the opponent 37-yard line. That struck me as, I wonder if Shanahan's not feeling so hot about Purdy. But you're right, that doesn't really make sense because Purdy really was playing well. That really stunned me, and I was trying to do the math in my head. Is why did he just do that? And then that's what the final score ended up being, so it didn't exactly work out.
Right. I think they were off balance all night offensively because they're playing this insane defense. Brian Flores has brought a crazy energy. I think he kind of reminds me of Wade Phillips, in that Wade Phillips, whenever you would bring him into your 26th ranked defense, Wade Phillips will clean it up fast. It might not work forever, and Flores is even crazier than Phillips in the kamikaze style that he plays with, but he's basically taken these guys. They got rid of some older veterans, and he's taken a similar secondary, for instance, Can Bynum with the 2 interceptions, Akalab Evans, who was out there on Ayuk all night, this same young guys in the secondary. And Harrison Smith, who's playing like he's 5 years younger, and he's just had blitzing every time. And when he doesn't blitz, he only rushes 3 and he drops 8. And you're like, what the hell is happening here? And I think it just had them off balance. They definitely stopped the run really well. And it's not going to work every game, and it's not going to even work every series. You saw that 3-play drive where they had some good cover 0 beaters with McCaffrey scoring that long touchdown. And that can happen against Flores too. But he has them playing with an energy. And I think he was messing with their minds a little bit. I really thought the Minnesota coaches were awesome because KOC had all the answers for San Francisco's defense. And likewise, I think Flores really scrambled them.
And it was the second game in a row where we saw Purdy, who's been, if anything, if he's not majestic, athletically, but he's been safe with the football and been smart and kind of beyond his years, and that's what you like about him. And it's 2 games in a row where he threw very dangerous lobs while he's getting tugged to the ground and getting thrown around. And the one for all the preseason tropes that we ignore, I kind of think I'm starting to buy into the one where a bunch of defensive players are we've got a new coordinator. He's made it less complex, less mind altering, and it's we just go be who we are. Because that was Schwartz in Cleveland. That's Flores in Minnesota. And it's, if anything, Minnesota cut talent off that roster. They got a lot of young guys, they cut veteran guys, and everyone seems to be responding better. And this was a pretty incredible, crazy, unpredictable performance on both sides of the ball by the Vikings. And it's just something's working. And like, I know probably this is, it's a Monday night game and in Minnesota. Will it translate a week from now? The Vikings are bound to disappoint us and, befuddle us again as viewers. But this is their ceiling. In 2 weeks in a row, two teams' ceilings top the Niners. And I find that to be one of the more surprising storylines of this October month.
And this is why I like the Vikings. Like Greg has 14 favorite teams. The Vikings would be on my list of teams that I'll always be cool watching because they really are entertaining. Like their games are more often than not. There's something going on in the game, whether it's weird or there's an upset one way or the other, or there's exciting plays going on. And I think Cousins, for being like the Huey Lewis of NFL quarterbacks, like hip to be square, like he's kind of fun and cool to watch as a player, and I've always enjoyed watching him. So, it's interesting to see where they end up. And I don't want to hear it, by the way, on the other side, and this is my last point, and you guys could share whatever you want to share. I don't want to hear, because I know it's going to happen, because everyone's going to key in on the two interceptions with Purdy now, and you have all these idiots and bloviators on the 14 different morning shows, on all the regional networks and on the
Regional
worldwide
networks, take a shot.
Leader and our own network, let's be fair, that are now going to be running those two picks on an endless loop and some of the low lights from the Browns game, even though he got them into chip shot range basically and the kicker blew it. And they're going to say, oh, now Purdy stinks. So, but you can't do that, because you can't say when he was thriving that he's just a product of the system. And then when he encounters struggles, you're not saying it's the system anymore. Then it's him. And it's like, so just stick a sock in it. Let's give this guy a little room to breathe and understand that it's a long season. And it was very unlikely he was going to go pole to pole as a dominant player. I want to see the fuller breadth of things, but just get ready for that. There's going to be a lot of mindless chatter about Purdy actually not being good. And should the 49ers have traded Trey Lance? Is Sam Darnold next up?
Nobody's saying that.
I'm just saying, is Sam Darnold maybe the better option for this team long term? Just shut it out. Shut out the noise. In fact, use it as a barometer of whether you should watch or listen to those programs. Okay, that's my advice.
Greg, I love so Dan, I as a Purdyite, I really love what you just said. And it's kind of like you're sending out a proclamation. Anyone that's paying attention to this show,
a Purdyation
out there. I'm a Purdyite. I think let's see if people can calm their and cool their jets a little bit. Let's not go down Dak Prescott Avenue with Brock Purdy, because I think you have to look at the overall body of work. As I knock something off my desk, he's allowed to throw a couple rough interceptions and a couple rough passes like every other quarterback we follow.
He is very Dak-like. I think he's going to stay that way, because I think he's going to be there for a while.
and I'll say this too. The Cowboys heading into their bye week, I thought it was kind of interesting, some of the things they were saying, because in our podcast is not innocent of this. The Cowboys have a stinker, and we are just laying them to waste. But if the Niners have a stinker, the Eagles have the stinker, I feel like we're just a little bit more soft on those teams.
The Cowboys have had two. The Cowboys got beat by what we consider.
I'm just saying, I get their point.
Because of how seasons have ended there. I understand. It's because of how seasons have ended. I think you're right on Purdy. I think he's a very promising young quarterback. I think it's interesting to see Kyle Shanahan go through on the sideline. You could see his frustration. It's almost like I think he believes in Purdy so much in the same way that he once believed in Kirk Cousins. It's very interesting to have this loss to Cousins, the guy that he famously was trying to get back in 2017, and then they tried to get Brady, and then they had Jimmy G, and so then they couldn't get Cousins, and Cousins is absolutely shredding him with an unreal performance. I thought it was interesting, because I think he's almost surprised when Purdy makes any sort of mistake, but he also threw some dimes tonight. And I think that if I'm laying blame, number one is on this defense for a total stink fest of a performance. And more to the point, I'm just giving credit for Cousins, him moving inside the pocket, kind of like a Tom, a very poor man's Tom Brady, but moving in the pocket away from pressure, especially on that last third down after third down. These are 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 9s with no logical guy who's winning one-on-one. Addison left that game. Hawkinson's in and out. He's throwing to Brandon Powell and KJ Osborne, Tristan Jackson, and Ty Chandler. I mean, I love this. Was great offensive football from him and from his head coach. I think really just in a groove, and it was a season-changing win. We talked with Mike Garafolo earlier on Monday on the trade deadline special. Everyone should check that out. And we talked about the Vikings, sort of like, well, if they lose tonight, Danielle Hunter, and would Cousins even be, everything is much different than it was earlier today, and very different than when it was
Rosenthal.
0-3.
If they listen to that show, they heard Rosenthal totally dismiss Minnesota's chances in this football game.
Because I think Kwesi, in his heart, would love to get a first-round pick for Hunter, which they maybe could have gotten. But now it's hard to trade him away. They're 3-4. He'd try to win next week, and maybe the luck's coming back. When I thought that was I'll end with this because it was a crazy play. 16 seconds left in the half. It was a game-changing play in the first half. No timeouts. They get a 60-plus yard touchdown on a play that Charvarius Ward probably should have intercepted. It goes through his arms. Probably Cousins' worst throw of the night. Turns into a long touchdown. I thought, maybe the football gods have returned to Minnesota. Now they're sprinkling 2022 luck back on this team.
Wait a minute. The football gods,
they're winning one-score games
okay,
again.
But the football gods, if they're sprinkling luck on the Vikings, typically it's just to take you and tug you somewhere deeper into the fall and winter where we break your heart again. I would say this because I think with football more than any other sport, we break down and look at every individual games. We stop down and watch, we'll go watch the Buccaneers film. We'll watch, if it's baseball or basketball, you just move on and look at who scored what, and you bypass it. They're 5-2, the Niners. I would not be surprised if they're 10-4 when you double their record. I would not be surprised if the Vikings, who are 3-4, are 6-8. It's one night in the season. It was a return to normalcy in terms of the Vikings are better than their record. I think a little bit, especially on offense, they've been productive, but I refuse
what
to.
A night though for Kirk. It was a big night for Kirk.
Come on, Sess, dog.
It was a magical night for
not,
Kirk. If nothing else happens this season, he had this night. This was a nice night for Kirk.
Come on,
absolutely.
Mark.
And
He's
they're
you try to fork the Vikings last week, and now you're trying to take the wind out of their sails to end this segment.
No, I'm not. Don't try to straw man me into some corner. I'm happy for the Vikings.
I am not.
Tonight.
I'm just saying what you're saying. Don't get
I'm
excited about this win.
It's more from a Niners angle. I'm not going to panic about Brock Purdy. To your point, this is what your argument was.
I'm not talking about Brock
14
Purdy.
regional, local shows that you are talking about. That they're going to be 10-4 and be fine at some point. So, cool.
Well, nobody.
Night.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that. I don't think.
I agree.
I don't see a tailspin for the
Williams
Niners here.
Right.
Although they haven't lost 2 games in a row, the Niners, in a couple of years, and they have a tough game next week too.
It's been a strange 10 days. It's been a weird 10 days, but.
What do they got next week?
They got the Bengals next week. That's a fun one.
A resurgent Bengals team next week at home. That's going to be a lot of fun. And last thing is to ties it all together. Kyle Shanahan, Kirk Cousins is his white whale, right? Kirk Cousins is heading towards free agency.
I don't know. That feels like 6 years too late, but that's
I'm just saying.
Okay.
And Brock Purdy probably is there for, a long time. I think Kyle Shanahan loves him. I'm just saying Kirk Cousins is headed toward free agency.
I'll never forget that. It was a Mike Silver report on NFL.com, how he was desperately trying to get Kirk Cousins. I think it was 2017. You could look it up. We're doing podcasts and writing newsers. And, sometimes when it was a hot newser, you'd even write an analysis off the newser. We're double newser in it.
People wanted Mike Glennon for a couple years too. I mean, people are strange.
Mark, can you say that it's possible also that the Vikings are 8-6 after 14 games?
Yeah.
I do think it is. I'm not. That was more of a not panic about the Niners take than me trying to cut Vikings fans off of the knees. They're wicked sensitive. I get it. I wish well for them.
I think it was more just it was a nice night in the Kirk Cousins career arc. It was just nice for him to be the star.
They're playing better. In fact,
the show.
Yeah, the difference between the 13-4 Vikings and this 3-4 team, they can get hot in that division. They can get hot. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll do some news. All right, welcome back. Yes, as we mentioned earlier, we had Mike Garafolo on the program from the Chris Wessling Podcast Studio earlier today in Inglewood, and where Gregg is sitting right now, as a matter of fact. And we did our trade deadline primer, digging into the potential storylines as we look ahead to next Tuesday's October 31st deadline to acquire players from other teams. So make sure you check that out also. And this is, geez, it's back. Check your socials. This guy gets it with Marc Sessler. And Mark, this guy gets it, the season premiere, and this is very in line with how, big time TV shows operate through the years. You come back with your premiere, you're looking to do a big number with the Nielsen's, and this idea that you ran with was so hot that we couldn't even reference really what it was exactly in our social media teas. The people will have to hit it up on the audio podcast to find out.
I think they will. I think when I take the model that I know of, a couple shows that have a big sort of launch and announcement and say, we're here to stay, and they put out one episode a year. And I kind of learned from that. We did one last year. We've got one this year, but I waited this long. I didn't want to rush. I didn't want to be superfluous. The topic I found, to be honest, because I think no one that of importance higher up in the company is listening to this. We kind of snuck it by the NFL. We snuck it by the company because it's a topic that's a little too hot. You couldn't put an NFL.com story out there about it the way you'd want to. You got to find a way to, shove it in there. And that's what we did.
Right.
This topic, what we've done, I think people will see exactly what we're talking about. It is hot to the touch. It's electric. And I think it's going to be succinct in the sense that the episode is about a minute and 41 seconds long. But why waste words? It's time to be succinct.
That explanation was almost as long as the actual episode.
It was longer than the episode
itself. It reminds me of, when a big feature drops and you're like, the author is like, I have been working on this feature for 17 months. You've been working on this guy gets it for 12 months.
Yeah. And it's my
and
flowers of the killer moon, I think,
if you saw the write-up in the Hollywood Reporter, Mark was referred to as a more carnally furious, morally safer. So, if that doesn't get you plugged in, I don't know what it is. And finally, before we get to the news, NFL Plus Game of the Week is back. We absolutely just killed it with our breakdown, I thought, of Browns Colts 39-38. So check that out for some deep discourse.
We might have included some elements of the game that we probably should have included in the Sunday night recap. So, we find a way to patch it up in the end. So,
what does that mean? What do you mean?
I'm a journalist, and I don't need to get into it on this show, but there are elements of that game that maybe if there had been a little more robust encapsulating.
Why are you?
The penalties at the end we dug into.
Some Colts fans are angry at the Cess Dog about
they
not
are,
talking
and
about
I don't
the
do well
penalties.
with that, so they can stick it.
So if those first of all, kick rocks. We do literally a trillion shows, and we don't all hit home runs every single time. If you were looking for some deep discourse on the end of that game as an addendum, check out the NFL Plus breakdown of that game. All right, now let's get into the news. Kick rocks. I'm bringing kick rocks back. Yeah, kick rocks, see? All right, let's get into it, starting with a trade. And actually, there's something that came down when we were doing our trade deadline primer with Mike Garafolo. The Eagles added some reinforcements to their banged-up secondary. They get Kevin Byard in a trade with the Tennessee Titans on Monday. The Eagles sent back Terrell Edmonds plus 2 draft picks to the Titans. It's a homecoming for Byard, who's born in Philly, named after Brian Dawkins. How cool is that? And now he joins a new team. Is there anything else you wanted to add there, either of you boys?
Well, no, just I think it speaks to where they know they're weak on their team, and it could work out really well. It might not. He's a little older. That he's an aging player. He might be on this team next year. It's more about this season. He's a player I always remember first became famous because Deion Sanders didn't know his name as he was headed towards an all-pro season, and he was upset about that, and Deion took offense. And now he's going to be much more in the spotlight, and they needed it. Like, I think they know they are not right in the secondary, but I don't think it's like some sort of game-changing move. It's just one that makes me think, man, the Titans might be selling and Derrick Henry might be somewhere else, and that's going to give us some fun stuff to talk about in the next week.
The only thing I'd add is that there are, like, I've seen Titans fans out on X and other platforms a little annoyed that they've become this sort of pipeline to recreate the Eagles and position groups where they're struggling. You need a wide receiver, let us just sell you A.J. Brown and have our head coach march out of the draft room. Oh, you need a safety? Oh, you're struggling. You might be a little vulnerable. We'll just give you Kevin Byard. No problem. It's like, I don't know. At some point, it's like, when do we stop just force feeding, and pink ponying the Philadelphia Eagles?
Forgot about pink pony. A.J. Brown has more receiving yards than the entire Titans wide receiver group, by the way, this year.
Woof. And who would know more about pink pony, the operation connected to the Patriots during their glory years, than Mike Vrabel, head coach of the Titans? So, tough sitch. Justin Fields, in injury news, unlikely to be back in the lineup in Week 8 against the Chargers. That from head coach Matt Eberflus, who said he is doubtful to play. So that means another start for rookie Tyson Bagent, who had some big moments and flashed some really impressive ink along his breastplate, and when he had his shirt off during game ball. And also Eric Roberts, our producer, who is inked up so hardcore that he will travel like to San Diego, for instance, to go to tattoo festivals and competitions. That's neither here nor there, but Bagent has it on his back as well. So I'm just into Bagent. He's an interesting guy, and he gets another start.
Yeah, if Bagent beats the Chargers, that's a fascinating draft pick of a like game between two win teams this week, just because there's a lot of chaos possible if the Bears win that game. I'm interested. Their offense would look completely different with them, and it certainly wasn't bad.
It's also happening on Sunday night. Like, if you're Tyson Bagent, like,
oh my gosh,
you were anonymous. That. You were anonymous 2 weeks ago, and now you're going to be playing on Sunday Night Football for the Chicago Bears against the Chargers.
This is just real. We'll preview it during the week, but man, Brandon Staley. if I was Brandon Staley, Tyson Bagent is the last guy I want to be facing on Sunday Night Football.
I mean, what an indictment.
This is potential to not make it to Week 9 for Brandon Staley.
What an indictment of the entire Brandon Staley enterprise that he's shaking his boots because Bagent's getting another start. But it's a weird situation there. In other injury news, the NFL is asking injury report compliance questions to the Atlanta Falcons about when they knew rookie running back Bijan Robinson was not physically well and why it wasn't reported per league policy. Adam Schefter reported on Monday. This is standard practice when a player, day of game, suddenly is not available. There are a lot of reasons why it's very important that teams comply with the injury things in terms of things that happen in the desert. It's a very serious thing. I mean, as you know, from basically 48% of commercials connected to the NFL now. So the Falcons declined comment Monday evening. I covered that game for the podcast yesterday, and like the stench was in the air, just how weird it all smelled. Not because it's so strange that a player would wake up and I guess was it reported as headaches after the fact? I don't know. It was all the way it was all reported, the way that he was active and dressed and on the field for some snaps and then getting a carry in the final minute. Everything about it was just, I mean, it had Artie Smith's fingerprints all over it for starters, but whatever.
Yeah. And he also he was not feeling well on Saturday. So it was the day before. And I think that we all are, if you're in a fantasy league, everyone had the group thread where one of the friends who had Bijan Robinson is, writing the text where he's annoyed that the Falcons did this. He's probably annoyed with the Falcons in general, but this happened. But then on top of it, it made me think a little bit back to the 4 billion NFL.com posts written about Percy Harvin with migraines. And I was yesterday, I wonder if this was I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just a headache, but a migraine kind of thing could come and go. You might be better the next day, but I don't know if you're the Falcons.
But that's the thing, though. If he would have woken up with migraines, Mark, And they come on in the telecast, and after he doesn't play in the first half, we come out at halftime, and Christina Pink does that interview, and the head coach says, yeah, he woke up, he had some head issues, he had some migraines. No one would have batted an eyelash because the league takes it very seriously, brain trauma and things of that nature. And yet the wording around it was just odd. He just wasn't feeling like himself or wasn't feeling great. Odd. The whole season over there has been odd. And yet the Falcons are in first place. Also in first place, the Kansas City Chiefs, but they will be without one of their most important defenders, Nick Bolton, the linebacker. He had a wrist injury. This was kind of a harrowing report from the CBS telecast. I think Wolfson reported that he was screaming in pain as he headed back to the locker room. And that's typically what happens to people when they dislocate their wrist, and he needs surgery, and it's going to cost them approximately 2 months, according to Pellraiser. And we mentioned that briefly on the trade deadline show as well, because in an underhanded way, Pelissero snowed under the old rap sheet, and rap sheet won't forget.
He won't. And I won't forget Brett Veach, their general manager, for signing one of my favorite off-ball linebackers that I always thought could do a little bit of everything, Drew Tranquill. And when he's come in for Bolton this year, has really looked great. So I think they're fine with Tranquill and Gay, but it's and with Willie Gay's the other one. But Bolton's was playing at a Pro Bowl level, so it's a big-time disappointment for them.
In other injury news, the Bills are losing a big part of their offense. Dawson Knox, their tight end, also had a wrist issue that required surgery. He's been dealing with that for a couple weeks, and they decided to shut him down, get the surgery done. They don't have a timeline on when he'll be back. He played 63% of their snaps on Sunday. Dalton Kincaid, their rookie tight end, saw more work in that game, and you imagine he will continue to see more work after that.
Keep an eye on the Bills during the trade deadline thing, because, remember we talked this whole offseason, it was like, oh, who's going to step up for being a weapon? Oh, they're going to do the 2 tight end thing, and they did. They were playing 2 tight ends more than anyone in the league until this week against the Patriots when they started to back off it, and it's just like, where's the third receiver? Where's even the second receiver? Gabe Davis comes and goes. He's been fine, but they feel like a team, especially after this injury, I think, that might try to make a move.
That really showed up in the Patriots game. I think we mentioned that on Sunday night, where it's just like, where was the other weapon that they could have used when it's not Stephon Diggs? And I know with Kincaid and Knox, they were doing what, not the 12 personnel, but the 11.5 personnel, where they're using 2 tight ends all the time. And I think Kincaid maybe a little bit less as a blocker, but if anything, it might, the one blessing in disguise is if you get Kincaid in there 100% of the time, I think he is that weapon, and he's sort of shown that, and maybe they come out of it with him growing.
Bills got problems. Keep an eye on the Bills here. Broncos safety Kareem Jackson suspended 4 games for multiple violations of unnecessary roughness. Woof. The suspension comes after Jackson was disqualified from Sunday's win over Green Bay after delivering a hit to Packers tight end Luke Musgrave, who was deemed a defenseless receiver. He was flagged for a personal foul penalty in addition to his disqualification from the game. And you do the math. I'm not sure what his salary is, Kareem Jackson, but essentially a 4-game suspension. That's without pay. So whatever his game day check times 4, that is a huge penalty. And you take him off the field for essentially a quarter of the season, trying to send the message to Jackson and others, just like with the gambling policy. Hey, don't do this because we're going to come for you, and it's going to hurt in the wallet as well as your reputation.
One of Wes's favorite players, because he's a throwback, like a Bob Sanders type. I mean, he loves hitting guys in the head. Just keeps happening over and over. I thought he might get traded, but that's not going to happen now.
I love that you're concerned about his reputation. That his reputation is going to take a huge hit.
I honestly could not care less, but I do like that Wes liked him. But I also being I'm a throwback. I'm a hard-nosed guy. I'm going to knock this guy's head off. He won't know where he is after the game. We don't do that anymore. So you gotta adjust. Gotta adjust. I'm sure he might now that he's lost, I don't know, $2 million or whatever it's going to be. Finally in the news, give me that iconic Mark Robideau theme.
Little Hard Knocks.
All right, we're coming off the New York Jets Hard Knocks season this summer, but unless you been under a rock, you should know that they've been doing a in-season version for 3 years now, and this is a pretty good get, I thought, for the Hard Knocks and HBO team. The Miami Dolphins will be the featured in-season team this season. The team and HBO and NFL Films announced in a joint statement. Last year, we tracked the Cardinals. I could not have cared less about that team or season, so I did not watch that. The previous year was what?
Colts?
The Colts.
Colts, and I guess there was some Palace intrigue because they collapsed horrendously down the stretch. But the Dolphins are a bona fide AFC contender that have all this kind of buzz around them, and crucially, Mike McDaniel, who is a hugely compelling figure. So this one might be one that I'm checking out.
I feel like these shows depend on the coaches so much, and Mike McDaniel being the leader of this team. And this team, well, and we'll see where they go. They got the Patriots this week, and who knows what their story will be. But they feel like one of the freshest, most interesting stories of this season. So for Hard Knocks to have the Jets in training camp and then the Dolphins now, nice season for Hard Knocks. I will be watching this because of my spiritual brother, Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, there's an invisible string, Mark, that ties Mike McDaniel to Gregg Rosenthal. And if anybody can unlock Gregg, which we certainly have not been able to do in the last 12 years or so, it would be McDaniel. So in general, I would love for us to talk to Mike McDaniel, and maybe that's something we could work on, because I think we're all of us are kind of super into the personality, and then it's this guy that's an innovator in the league, and I feel like he would be good on the show. I think if we could get him on the program, that would be fun. So maybe watching this show will give us some good background if we can make that happen.
He would be great on the show. I don't know how, and Greg, I understand where you're coming from. Like, I don't know how you co-opted Mike McDaniel. I think that there's a fascination.
This is my theory, actually. Yeah. I have to say,
Yeah,
like,
Dan's
I just
made this
the
up.
way, kind of the mannerisms and it's like you can't tell, is he being purposefully obtuse, but he's obviously there's some deep thinking going on, but why is he trying to annoy me right now? There's a lot of things, there's a lot of layers to McDaniel and Gregg that I just see parallels.
I know. I think like Greg, do you call it like a fresh choice or whatever? Like, I mean, the last 2 years of this show, it was like, first of all, we have football happening like literally every second of every day, whether it's news or games, and it's like it's just this. But this choice, I don't know how they can't. Maybe they've updated how they decide what team to pick, and maybe it's a little bit. Let's find out where we are like a couple weeks into this season. But like, I'll watch this. I'm interested in this. If you pick 25 other teams, hard out, don't care. Like, I'll survive without it. I'll watch this, and I think Mike McDaniel is an absolutely core reason why.
It's the biannual Marc Sessler caveat-filled Hard Knocks endorsement.
No, but listen, but like that's because they made the right choice. Like, there was a period where like we got either the Rams or the Chargers on like the summer and the autumn version and all this other business, or the Live or Die show or whatever it was called, like All In, or like it's just like. I don't need to see any more like Jeff Fisher Rams.
It's all or nothing.
Items.
It's all or nothing.
All
Respect,
or nothing. This I'm in for. And I'll probably at least watch 2 episodes.
We're curious. The invisible string connects Gregg to McDaniel. My invisible string connects to Jim Tomsula, and Mark's invisible string connects to Frank Reich. So that's everything for you.
This is not accurate.
Mark's
Jim
invisible
Tomsula
string connects to Kate Winslet.
That is accurate.
He wishes. All right. That's it. Okay, so again, this guy gets it, lands in your feed on Tuesday, so do not miss that because it's trenchant. And like I said, the Hollywood Reporter called Mark a more carnally furious Morley Safer. So if that doesn't get you to tune in, I just don't know what will. And we'll be back on Wednesday with Colleen Wolfe and a very, very special holiday episode in a way, because it is kind of a holiday on our show for this particular episode. Until then, heed the call.